American Principles Project. They are launching a new campaign ad in a number of swing states, including Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. They're targeting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and their dangerous policies when it comes to transgenderism and trying to infiltrate our school libraries with sexually explicit material. Here's one of those ads brought to you by the American Principles Project, set to air very soon in swing states.
What does Kamala Harris actually believe? Kamala backs taxpayer-funded sex change procedures for minors. She supports men competing in girls' sports. And incredibly, Kamala even advocates for sexually explicit books in elementary school libraries. Vote against Kamala Harris. She's not just liberal, she's dangerously liberal.
Joining me now is the Director of Policy and Government Affairs over at the American Principles Project, the group responsible for these ads, Jon Schweppe. Jon, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Of course. So what's with these ads you're airing? Where will they be airing? When will they be airing? And why is it so important to get the message out of how dangerously liberal Kamala Harris and Tim Walz actually is, especially on this issue of men competing in women's sports, men exposing themselves in women's locker rooms? Tell me about these new ads you're launching.
Yeah, so we are up actually now on the air and also, doing digital and all sorts of stuff. 7 states. We're going to do $18 million total in the election cycle. And basically what we're trying to do is get the message out to voters, some of these swing voters that we're targeting, about how extreme Kamala Harris actually is. You know, right now, if you see Harris's ads, all she's talking about, she literally has pictures of the wall in some of her ads, basically trying to get people to think she's this moderate. And we know, this is a California liberal. She's one of the most extreme people out there. And what we've found in our polling and our focus groups is that, her extremism on this transgender stuff, her opposition to parental rights, her willingness to show obscene books to kids in elementary schools, this is stuff that really separates voters from her. They really don't like it. And so we're making sure to get that message out. And, we think it's going to be a critical part of helping Trump win in November.
It's one of the issues that actually has bipartisan support, where nobody's for this. Look at public polling, I think 70, 80%, something like that, actually oppose men pretending to be women competing in women's sports. Yet Donald Trump is losing right now the college-educated suburban mom vote. Make it make sense. If you're a mother or a father with girls, young girls, 9, 5, whatever the age are, and sitting back, not necessarily voting for Donald Trump, even sitting it out, voting for Kamala Harris, you are exposing your daughters to danger should they reach power. Why in the world are suburban mothers and not so much fathers, but especially the suburban mothers actually planning to vote for Kamala Harris? Is it because they just don't know about this?
I think that's a big part of it. What happens is that they see that, Trump sends out mean tweets, or, maybe they're thinking about abortion or whatever, and that's affecting their vote. But the reality is, even some of these liberal suburban women we found in our focus groups are moved by this stuff. They don't think kids should be getting sex changes. They don't think men should be competing against women in sports. And they really, this is like one of the strongest issues out there. They really don't think we should be showing pornographic books to children in schools. And that's why, by the way, you see Democrats, they talk about book bans. They're doing their best to, insulate themselves from this attack because they know it's so brutal. And, the reality is this is just their I don't know if it's like a graduate school thing, like you go to graduate school and all of a sudden you think that women can be men. I don't know what it is, but this educated elite class, they are obsessed with the trans issues. It's all they care about. And that's just not where normal voters, even normal Democrat voters, are.
Yeah, and this crazy, very weird, by the way, VP nominee Tim Walz, he's appropriately named Tampon Tim because he wants to publicly fund tampons in not just women's rooms, but men's rooms. And the left will say, oh, what's the big deal? It's whatever. If you're not going to use a tampon, then just don't use it. But this is much deeper than that. It's not so much women who think that they're men using that restroom and then using the tampons because only women can use tampons. It is endorsing the idea, which is even the more dangerous part of this, that a woman can become a man, and conversely, a man can become a woman. So just by putting tampons in the bathroom, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris endorse the idea that men can use women's locker rooms. It's so much bigger than just, you don't need a tampon, then don't use it, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think, and our ads really try to get at this. A lot of people, I think Americans tend to be kind of folk libertarians where they're just like, look, whatever you want to do. They aren't like that with kids, right? They absolutely don't think that kids should be able to do this stuff. And they also, there's limits to that. They think, for example, we have Paula Scanlon, who was a UPenn swimmer who swam with Leah Thomas, right? Paula talks about how Leah would change in front of the girls in the locker room and expose himself. And like, this is where you draw the line, right? And the reality is that Tim Walz, Kamala Harris, their policies, they support this. They want our laws to basically say that a man who identifies as transgender should have full access to everything women have, to all of their private spaces. It's really wrong. And I think, again, we're talking to people in Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, these critical swing states. They're not on board with this weird Acela corridor view on what transgenderism, on gender, just writ large.
Yeah, of course not. And Paula Scanlon, I've had the privilege of meeting her a few times. She's a friend of the Vince Coglianese show. She said this in public testimony to Congress, so I'm not violating any privacy here or whatever. She was actually sexually assaulted as a young teenager. To deal with that trauma and then having to be present to a man exposing himself in her locker room, which she says, I think it was 18 times a week. This is what she had to do. And then she went to UPenn to complain about it. And they said, no, Paula Scanlon, you're the problem. You need to be more accepting. And you need to accept that that man thinks he's a woman and therefore he is a woman. Here is that ad with Paula Scanlon and American Principles Project.
My name is Paula Scanlon, and I was a Division I swimmer at the University of Pennsylvania. I've spent all my life training to be the best swimmer I could be, but nothing could have prepared me for showering with a man. As a woman, there is nothing more violating than being forced to compete and share locker rooms with men. Dangerous Democrats like Kamala Harris support policies that would silence women like me and force us to compete against men. It's just not fair.
Yeah, horrific. And that should obviously resonate with undecided or even left-leaning voters. I'm not a one-issue voter, but if I was, this is a non-starter. People always say, we got more in common than we don't with the left. And my response is, I'm sorry, if you think that men can expose themselves to women, we have nothing to talk about. I'm not even interested in being your friend anymore, to be honest. Right. It's such a non-starter. And I think the more people that are exposed to this type of information, the more people will obviously come on board and deny this presidency that Kamala Harris is seeking. And also in Minnesota, they got these crazy laws up there that Tim Walz has endorsed. He wants to make Minnesota a sanctuary state for trans students. So the state could actually take your child away if you as a parent says, no, Billy, you're not going to be Sally from now on. That's extreme, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is actually the reality. We have 25 states that have passed protections on our side, right, that have passed protections for kids against the transgender industry. But the reality is that states like Minnesota, you look at Iowa. Iowa has a ban on sex changes for kids. Minnesota has a law that basically says that, if a kid crosses the border and comes there with any adult and they want to get sex change procedures, they basically won't give the kid back to the parents, right? I mean, it's actually pretty incredible stuff. And so, what we're doing, look, you look at these polls, and when you ask voters, what issues do you care about? They always tell you inflation, immigration, crime, and those issues matter. But they're not thinking top of mind about some of this stuff. But this stuff is shocking. It's shocking extremism. And once they learn about this, it just totally disqualifies Kamala Harris, Tim Walz in their mind. And so you see the Trump campaign, you see even Senate Republicans starting to message using this issue. I think it's going to be critical, and I think it's going to be a big part of why we win in 2024.
I sure hope so. The left's platform is basically eliminating the role and responsibility of parents altogether. If a parent can't make the rules in the house, when a child says, I'm actually the opposite gender, and a parent can't say no, they want to limit parenting altogether. And that's kind of their goal from the get-go. They want to destroy the nuclear family so that maybe their public school system can actually raise them. And they can become these social justice warriors that you see running amok on colleges and supporting Hamas and all this. It all starts in the family when they're growing up, and the left is determined, dead set, to destroy any role that parents ever have. I got one more audio bite I want to play for you. This is also from American Principles Project. It features a detransitioner, Laura Becker, who was fooled by the medical industry into changing genders, in air quotes, because there's no such thing.
When I was 19 years old, doctors led me to believe that I was transgender. I was told that hormones and surgeries were my only options. They were wrong. Now I suffer from irreversible changes to my body and mind that I will live with for the rest of my life. Today, Kamala Harris is pushing children into these procedures, limiting their choices later in life. That's why I'm voting for Donald Trump, because he's committed to protecting children from these rash decisions.
Jon Schweppe, do you think the issue of transgenderism will come up at the debate on Tuesday on ABC? And if it does, will they call it gender-affirming care?
Oh, almost certainly. The media is absolutely complicit in this. And, 10 years ago, 10 years from now, when we overcome this and we achieve justice for all these detransitioners like Laura Becker, we're going to have to hold the media accountable too, because they've been the ones promoting this so much. But, I just want to say, folks like Laura, Chloe Cole, these people are so courageous to step up. What happened to Laura was just unbelievable. They butchered her body. They harmed her. That's a female. And listen to what happened to her voice. I mean, it's really horrific what these people do, and you should be upset about it. And that should be going into your vote in November. And again, that's why we're trying to get this message out to folks. You hear these testimonials. It's really powerful. And, I think it's going to affect the way people look at Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Yeah, and the left, they'll try to say you're wrong because, this is just such a marginalized community. We need to promote and accept and bring them with open arms. And, it's just it's less than 1% of the population. So what does it matter if this man is playing in a league of volleyball with women? It actually doesn't affect just that one person who considers them the opposite sex. It affects the entire league. Tell that to, let's say there's one trans person playing in a league of 200 volleyball girl players. That affects 201 people. It's not just this one person. Just take that the North Carolina volleyball player who still suffers brain injuries and concussions because a man spiked it on her forehead. This affects way more than just the marginalized communities that they're trying to tell us exists, and it's absolutely reprehensible.
But they're marginalizing them. I think that's what's so frustrating about this. These are victims of the left. Mm-hmm. Putting them in a position where they're going to be sterilized, their bodies are going to be permanently mutilated because they're being sold this false bill of goods. I think it's really critical that we frankly stand up for people who are suffering from gender dysphoria and try to get them the help they actually need, as opposed to these, this awful transgender industry that's trying to exploit them for profit. Right.
They obviously need some mental health. But God forbid we're supposed to end the stigma of mental health, but God forbid you tell one of these people to get some mental health. Well, you're just a transphobe. You're a bigot. End of conversation. So the whole farce that we need to end the stigma of mental health, I agree with that. You got a problem? Let's get some health. I'm not going to stigmatize you for that. But the second you request someone get help, well, then you're the hateful bigot. And there's just no winning with this anymore. But Jon Schweppe, before I let you go, just because I know you follow this all so closely and social media is one of your expertise, what do you make of these new allegations by Merrick Garland and Joe Biden that, Russia is interfering in this next election, trying to help Donald Trump get elected. You got some thoughts on that you want to share?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I think there's actually a lot of foreign money that goes into our elections that we should be concerned about. And you'd love to see equal justice from DOJ in terms of looking at all the Chinese money, all the Qatari money and all that. And that won't happen. This does look like a case where there is actually something there, and a lot of people were swept onto it as victims. But, frankly, I just think a lot of the stuff with the Russia is trying to tag all this to Donald Trump, and they're trying to use it in the political sense. And voters are smart; they're not going to fall for that, I think, in November.
Of course. Well, Jon Schweppe, the Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the American Principles Project. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for your expertise, and I hope to do it again soon. Okay.